Hey, Tommy.
How you doing, Tyler?
Great. Thanks for coming on. This is good because there's been so much camera news lately. So I was like, okay, I'll invite the guy on whose brand is to say, don't buy cameras, buy lights instead. But I'm gonna force you to talk about some camera announcements today. I know you're excited.
Okay, yeah, I am a little excited about some cameras.
We'll find time for lights too. I mean, there's plenty of time here. But first, let's talk about you for a second, because I mean, we're just meeting for the first time now too, and I'm sure some segment of the audience is as well, if they haven't encountered your YouTube before. But how did you get into YouTube? Your channel's, I mean, it's very focused on lighting, audio, and in a good way, in like the good technical way that I feel like I can really dig into your videos. How did you get started with that?
I'm a programmer by trade, right? That's my day job. And I worked for some companies that had huge social properties, and they would post a link on their, social media properties, and it would drive millions of, people to whatever they were linking to at that time. And I was just the programmer there. So I didn't really own any of what was happening there, but I saw the power of social there. And then my wife was watching a YouTube video of, some vlogger had like a 3-minute time lapse. She was like folding her laundry or something. It had like 50,000 views. And I was like, I could probably do better than that. And so I decided to kind of just try and figure out how to make videos. I've always been interested in photography, but, so I took my Canon 6D and decided to just start making some videos. I wanted to review some tech, and I was interested in a few other things and some science stuff. And I found out really quickly that I should really focus down on a niche, or not so much focus on a niche, but like in a specific part of a niche. And
and niche within a niche. But generally, I mean, that is helpful advice. Like it's relatively common advice, and I think for good reason, because it allows you to like really build a specific audience. Like people know why they're there for you, and they know what to expect. And that can be very comforting just as a content consumer. When I go look at other people's stuff, it's like, I know this is the person I go to for XYZ.
Right. And that was actually one of the most challenging things of me getting started on YouTube. Was like the fourth video I made, I hadn't focused yet. And it was the day after Pokemon Go came out. And so
nobody could focus then anyway. Yeah. We were all very distracted.
Well, the problem with that was I'm a programmer, and I know how to, write code and do things. And so I hacked Pokemon Go, and I showed the world how to do it. And that video, went viral for me, got 500,000 views, and I did a little series on it. And that's how I got my first 1,000 or so subscribers. But I didn't want to do anything with that series after the fact. I wanted to get back into like technology and, learn more about filmmaking stuff. But no one would view any of my videos right when I got started doing that, because they were looking for, how to hack your phone better or something. And that really kind of put a damper on my growth, because every time I'd publish a video, 1% of my subscribers would click on it, and they would only watch it for a few seconds. And so my channel wouldn't grow. And so I've since pruned, most of those videos off of my channel, because that's not what I want to do. I want to do stuff with filmmaking and obviously lighting. And so that's, for anyone that's listening to this that wants to start something and grow, you should focus on something from the start.
Well, I mean, I'm hoping I'll start focusing on something any day now, but because it is good advice. I mean, it is challenging to jump around. And I think a lot of people see really big, successful vlog channels or lifestyle channels, and they're like, that's what I want to do. Like, that'd be great for me. But then you realize it's much, much harder to build that audience. Like the people that are watching that, I mean, it can work and it can be bigger, but it's so much more challenging. It's more of a long shot. You have more of a sort of a guarantee of views if you are one of only a few people covering a topic, because there's a lot of people that are still interested in lights or V-mount batteries or whatever it is, So I totally think you're doing something good.
So the lights, so my neighbor was a producer, and he made big commercials. Their firm did the bong sound for Inception. He had experience and stuff. And so I asked him to watch one of my videos and give me some feedback. And this was only, a couple of years ago. He said, you should buy some lights.
And you took him very seriously. You're like, okay, I'll buy all the lights.
Well, first I was looking for
not at first.
Well, first I was looking for reviews on lights, and every YouTuber had a video about the Aputure 120D Mark, not the Mark II at the time. It was just the 120D, and I couldn't afford the 120D yet. So I was looking for alternatives, and then I found the Godox, brand, and they have some really cheap, affordable lights. And then I bought like a used Aputure light a little bit later, and then I compared them, and then it's kind of snowballed from there a little bit as far as my collection growing. And I'm wondering if this light is better than that light. Well, which one's next? And then a couple companies got in touch with me.
We'll dig deep into lights in the second half of all of this. Let's go light crazy, because I love lights too. I mean, a lot. I think you're 100% right that people focus way too much on cameras, lenses, the thing you hold in your hand, whereas the surroundings can be so much more important. Lighting, how you treat your room for sound, staging. Anyway, we'll get into it. But
sure.
The A7S III was announced, and now we've got it to compare it to the Canon R5, R6. All these things are crazy. I've been saying we're spoiled for choice for a while now. Like already, like a year ago, I was saying this. I'm like, oh yeah, we got tons of great cameras, so many good cameras out there. Now, what comes after spoiled? Like, we're spoiled rotten. It's just we have everything we could hope for, and I don't even know what to think about it. I mean, I'm kind of overwhelmed. By the way, if anybody's watching the video version of this, my AC is broken, so I'm doing everything I can to keep my body temperature down, because I walked in here and it was like 33 Celsius, which is a lot. So
what do you got there? Is that a bottle of Febreze?
This is a bottle. It's a bottle of water. I actually just shot the commercial. I shot the commercial for these water bottles. So again, a great reason to watch the video version of the podcast, because you can see what I'm talking about. And then I don't know, where did I post? I'm going to post Instagram about the video that we produced for them in a few days. But it also, not only does it taste delicious, it also cools your temperature down. So it's really saving my life right now.
What camera did you shoot that commercial with?
The C200, my favorite camera that I've owned. I know there are other favorite cameras out there that I could have if I did own them, but I really do like the C200. Before we go into the Sony, you've mentioned your dream camera right now is the Canon C300 Mark II. And I kind of share that with you. I'm a little bit split between that and C500, but what is it about the 300 Mark II that attracts you to it?
It's several $1,000s cheaper than the C500.
Oh, yeah. That's a good, it's a great feature.
Yeah. Let's see. I really like Canon's autofocus, and I know that, the pros are like, pros don't use autofocus. But I think that
that's not true anymore.
Yeah. I think as a solo shooter, someone who does everything by myself, it's incredibly helpful to have a reliable autofocus system. Currently I'm shooting on the GH5 for almost everything, and that camera is terrible for autofocus. And so my next camera purchase that I use for all my main A-roll stuff, I want it to have a great autofocus system, but also the options to do, have great dynamic range, solid 4K. I want it to have the XLR inputs. Just I want it to be like kind of a one all and everything package that works, and the C300 Mark II kind of fits that for me. If I can scrounge together the money to buy it.
Yeah, I've really loved living in the cinema camera world for the past year or so. I didn't have a cine camera before that, even though we would shoot video for work. Like, we shot video for clients for a few years previous to that, all on mirrorless. And finally I stepped it up, and I really like those extra features, things that I feel like are hard to move away from. And they would even be hard if I was using, let's say, this beautiful new A7S III is lack of internal NDs. That's such a struggle. I mean, I know that there are good variable NDs out there. There's actually a lot of good new choices like Polar Pro, Moment, like a lot of really solid mid-priced ones that do a better job than older variable NDs. But changing them drives me crazy. Like, I really don't like once you have to change lenses and then you have to take it off and put it back on, and the lens cap doesn't fit on the front of it. It's just not that convenient. And it does get smudged sometimes. Like there have been times that I put the next lens on. I realized there's a little fingerprint on there because I was trying to change things too fast. That just doesn't happen with the C200 or with cameras that have built-in NDs. So that's huge. XLR is just for ease of use. But other things that are now starting to change are like infinite record times. So we're seeing that in what Sony's doing. Anyway, I don't know why I'm delaying the Sony so much. Let's just dive right into it.
Well, hang on. VMAT batteries.
Sure.
That's the last thing I want to talk about. Is I want the ability to use VMAT batteries for everything because I have so many of them. Switching between all the different little camera batteries and NPF batteries and all the different styles of batteries. I have a whole like section of my closet dedicated to just charging different styles of batteries. I just want to stick with V mounts.
I actually just got my first V mounts this month. So this is the first time I've been able to start using V mounts. I was using the internals even for the C200 until recently because it doesn't have a mount on the back of it. Like, I don't know, I guess like Blackmagics kind of have that built in, or Reds or Alexas, and the C300. I think you have to buy that extension unit.
Yeah, it's an extra unit.
Is that how it works? But obviously you can rig these mirrorless cameras to take a V mount. A lot of people do it with the Blackmagics, for example. Does that not feel like an option for you, or?
No, it's it becomes unwieldy, I think. And when you're trying to rig up a mirrorless camera to, a small mirrorless to have all the features that a cinema camera has, then it's just like, get a cinema camera.
yeah, I know. I've done that whole like rigging up of a mirrorless, and I really don't enjoy it. Compared to as you rig up a cinema camera, it feels like this perfect little box that still like the shape stays the same and it just expands a little bit. Whereas a mirrorless starts feeling like a crazy spider that's about to fall apart. Like the legs are going to come off because it's shooting out in every direction and everything is so disconnected. Whereas, it's much more, you can have something so much more integrated with a cine camera. And the thing that's really helped on the C200 lately is I've added the bright tangerine cage to it, which is awesome. Like having a nice cage goes a long way. Okay, but I got to get to the Sony.
Okay,
because that's all anybody else cares about. Okay, so first, just what is this camera? I didn't pull up the spec sheet in front of me, so I'm gonna have to do it a little bit from memory. Well, like the biggest things are actually the ones that people are kind of glossing over because they expected it, which are 4K 10-bit 422. Which works in 24 frames per second, 30, 25, 60, and 120 frames per second. That is the biggest thing because these cameras, the A7S II and the A7 III, already had S-Log2 and S-Log3, but you would never use S-Log3 on the A7 III. Like you shouldn't, just don't touch it because 8-bit cannot handle that squeeze of the dynamic range. So it's just been sitting there. The good log has just been sitting there waiting, and now there's a 10-bit codec. That means that if nothing else changed about it, you could start shooting these cameras in a way that would match so much more closely to real cine cameras. So I know it's easy to blow past that feature, which again, this is on the Canons as well. It's also the most important feature that was added to the Canons. But this is super important. Like this is what will move these cameras to be much more of a professional tool than any of the mirrorless that came before.
I'm excited about the 12 megapixels because that means I actually am though, because
I
it
think
means
it's smart.
the photo sites are bigger, and so it collects more light, which is why it can see, in the night vision basically.
Yeah, and for anybody that's complained, I've seen a few people complain about it. I don't know how anybody, I'm very surprised that anybody would, but keep in mind, like this is the reason that the 4K looks really good and it's not going to overheat because it's not downsampling anything. It's just 1-to-1 pixels, right? And it's, I believe, okay, tell me if you know if this is true or not. I think it's 12 instead of 8 because 4K is 8 megapixels, but it's 12 because of the top and bottom, right? Because it's a different aspect ratio than 16:9.
That sensor very well may be true. I don't know. I know that all I know is 4K is supposed to be like 8 megapixels.
Yeah. So I'm willing to bet, I'll put it out there. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm willing to bet, 12 minus the top and bottom of a 4:6 image becomes a 8 megapixels. So anyway, I do know that it's a 1-to-1 pixel mapping. So there's no need to either downscale downscale from an oversampled image, which is a big part of the reason that the Canons overheat. And you also don't need to, line skip, right? That's the other way that you take away data if the megapixels are too much.
Right.
And I think the biggest win for Sony here is that they committed to this being a video camera. In Canon's case, they're like, we're gonna make the best hybrid. And they really tried. They tried very hard to make the ultimate hybrid cameras. Both the R6 and R5 are amazing at being, a photographer's video camera. So kudos to them for that. I still think Canon did a very good job, but I think they're going to get killed in the press because the overheating is a very real issue. And it means that even though this is a great stills camera, it is kind of failing in the video camera department in a big way. And the Sony's not. The Sony's, like a little perfect. I don't know.
It seems like it's the first, small mirrorless that Sony's actually listened to people on. They moved the little headphone jack up. So if someone is using the flippy screen, it's not going to get in the way of the screen. That's really cool. And a lot of people are going to say it's a vlogger feature, blah, blah, blah. Sure. But it's also convenient.
Yeah. It's also a professional feature to be able to turn it back and forth. Like this is something that I do with the C200 all the time, is be able to maneuver the monitor so that other people can see it. Sometimes it's the person, like if you've got a director on the side, they need to see it. Or sometimes the subject needs to just check their hair. Like there's a million reasons to maneuver a flippy screen. I will say a moment of let's just lay the other kind of flip screen to rest, which is the one that comes up 90 degrees, which we previously have had on the Sonys. That is actually so useful. And until I switched to the R, because again, I've been shooting my portable video camera was the A7 III until recently. Then I've been shooting with the EOS R. So I went from the 90 degree flip screen to the complete 360 rotating flip screen. And that actually, you do give something up because you can't just hold the camera. I said this before. You can't just hold the camera, look down like it's a medium format, and compose your shot in a direct perpendicular or parallel. Yeah, I don't know if it's perpendicular or perpendicular line to your subject, right? Like you look down and the subject's in front of you. Whereas when it's offset and the flip screen comes out to the side, that is a disconnection from the reality of the scene that I find it is slightly harder to compose because you're offsetting your hand. There's just this feeling of parallax that there is a loss there. It's maybe not worth the trade-offs. Like maybe the flip screen is enough better that, that's, I guess, why everybody wants to move to it. I'm just trying to remind ourselves that there was something good going on with the other kind of screen removing.
Well, same with, what is it? Fujifilm, their X-T3 and Nikon Z6. They've got the little acrobatic screens that don't necessarily do the 360 flip all the way around, but you can, flip the screen up a little bit towards you. I guess this is a podcast, so you can't see my hands motioning on the camera. But
I hear them.
But you know what I'm saying? Like how it doesn't flip all the way up, but it flips kind of up towards you.
Yeah.
When using a gimbal, that's so much more convenient than a screen that flips all the way around and then twists, because you can't do it
for sure
without taking the camera off the gimbal or twisting it around first.
I still think this way when rigging cinema cameras, that I basically go for the default red configuration. So a red camera is a box, and at the front, there's some screw mounts for the built-in red monitor, which is how you operate a red. Like kind of all the controls, for the most part, a lot of the controls are on that screen. It's a touch screen and it's directly attached to the camera. It's like part of the body almost. And then the handle is behind that. It's not a perfect design, but what I love about it, and the reason I try to replicate that in my builds, is that you get that same direct connection to the horizon line. Like as you rotate your camera, the horizon shifts in the exact same way. You don't have that offset thing. It's really helpful. Like it's better for when you're shooting looking down, and I often am. It's worse for a lot of other things. Can't do selfies. I mean, there's downsides. Just want to have that moment. Okay, but let's get into why is the A7S III crazy, and why is it stealing all the headlines from Canon's this was going to be the Canon show for,
Yeah.
for the last few weeks, everybody's like, RIP Sony, like Canon just destroyed you. And there's, nobody's ever going to buy a Sony again. And the narrative has completely flipped just since the last episode of this podcast.
Well,
everything is flipped.
Yeah, I think that the overheating issue has really drilled into a lot of people. There's this other person, Armando. I guess he's a YouTuber and Twitter.
Yeah, for sure. Armando's been on here before. Yeah.
Yeah. So he did he put like a huge ice block on it and he blew a leaf blower at it. He like went way out of proportion trying to get this thing to cool down, and nothing he did would work. Of course, everyone on Twitter was like, "You did it wrong. You should have used more ice. You should have drilled holes in it. You should have used a completely conductive piece of copper." And this, and it's like, come on, he did everything possible, and he could not slow down or rather speed up the cooldown time or make it last longer.
What you should do is not have to do any of that. I mean, that's really the answer. Like Tilta has announced that they're going to have a cooling cage for the R5 and R6, and that's just a terrible idea. I mean, it's a good business idea for them. I'm glad they saw that opportunity and are taking advantage of it.
I think it's hilarious.
You should not have to do that, and I bet it won't work. I'm pretty sure it's not going to have a big effect. It'll probably be marginal.
I thought it was an April Fool's joke.
Yeah, no, totally. I Googled it right after I saw somebody posted on Twitter. I was like, this can't be real. But I should expand on what I was saying last week, because last week I was just had I even played with it? I don't know. So in the last episode, I didn't know about the overheating, and since then I've posted my review of the R6. So my overheating experiences were that during the shoot, I actually didn't have it overheat at all. It never wasn't available to record. Like I could always record when I wanted to. It's not a problem in photography mode, in like shooting stills. A lot of people have been asking about that. I don't think it can overheat. It does generate heat as you're shooting stills. So if you shoot a lot of photos and then try to shoot 4K, it may be too hot to shoot very much of it, but you won't be prevented from shooting stills as long as that's all you're doing. And the same with 1080. You can just shoot 1080 all day long, and I don't think it ever is a problem. The overheating issues for me came at the end of the day when I was just sitting around my apartment. When I was editing the video, the apartment's just kind of getting hotter because I don't know, it's gotten hotter all day and I don't have proper air conditioning. And that's when I couldn't shoot with it. It was just like the ambient temperature of the camera was too high and I wasn't using it. I hadn't used it for 2 or 3 hours, and I looked down and it tried to turn it on. And it's like, oh, you can only record for 10 or 15 minutes right now. So that's a huge problem. If you live somewhere hot, I live in Canada. I don't even live somewhere hot, and it's going to be a real problem. So, and another interesting thing that Armando said, I think this was in the comments of my video. He was saying that the R6 might actually have worse overheating issues in 4K because it's always oversampling. It's always taking a 5K image and bringing it down to 4K, which is part of the reason that it looks so good. The default 4K mode on the R6 looks better than the default 4K on the R5. You have to turn on HQ mode on the R5 to get the betterness out of it, and then the R5 starts looking better, because that's when the R5 starts to oversample. Otherwise, if hopefully this isn't too much jargon, nobody's following it. If the R5 is line skipping, it's blurrier, and if the R6 never line skips, it's always oversampling, so it's always sharper.
Right, and so I don't think that you have to worry about any of that stuff with Sony's new camera, the A7S III, the legendary, the fabled, the talked about, and that's going to be the big thing, is you can just use it. I mean, that's
the tagline. You can just use it, and it doesn't stop working. Yeah.
Well, plus they've also redesigned the menus. Finally, the menus were my biggest gripe with any Sony that I've ever picked up. The ergonomics were always terrible. It seems like they've addressed a lot of those issues. And so when last week, and as early as yesterday, I was saying I still want the C300 Mark III. I've also used the Fuji GFX 100, which is a big camera. I mean, for what I've used I'm used to like the small mirrorless stuff. That's a significantly larger camera than physically than the others. And all the lenses for it are also very big. So I would equate that to a cinema camera because just the size and the weight. Now I know they're different and the cinema camera ergonomics are a lot better than the medium format, Fuji camera. But that being said, I think that using something like the C300 might be too big for me, what I do, trying to do handheld B-roll shots and just, messing around here in my little studio. It might be too much. It might be too big. And so I've been really harping on the just by lights because, you can improve your image that way. But it's also me thinking to myself, if I spend, $12,000 on gear for this camera that I don't even like using, it's going to really suck. And so now Sony's come out with a camera that'll get me almost all the way there. And I've already got all the external audio stuff, and lights and things. So it's a camera that I might actually consider getting and using without, memeing too hard on just by lights.
This episode of the Stalman Podcast is brought to you by the new season of Wireframe, a podcast all about how UX can help technology fit into our lives. Wireframe is a show for designers and the design curious, hosted by Khoi Vinh, Senior Director of Design at Adobe. The pandemic has changed our habits and our lives, and this season of Wireframe leans into how design interacts with these changes. So you'll listen to stories like how user experience design helps people manage stress and sleeplessness, or find something good to watch on an online streaming service, or even help individuals, creators, and social causes through crowdfunding. This is a good one too, how you can help older family members understand technology. This is actually the episode I just listened to, and you will instantly relate to that feeling of trying to explain something that feels so simple to you. And, sometimes others just don't get it and you don't know why. And this episode explained it surprisingly well. Like you feel so frustrated and why people can't understand, but you can actually come to some level of understanding. And there's an interesting example with the design of music interfaces around classical music, which skews to an older audience, but the titles of songs are extremely long. How do you solve for that? Because Spotify is designed for modern pop music with very short titles. Little details like that I find really interesting. So if you're creating content or products or whatever things that other people are going to consume, this can help give you a connection of understanding and empathy to their experience using your product. You'll hear from some seriously impressive designers and design leaders who have built UX and UI experiences for companies like Headspace, Patreon, Kickstarter, and With Things. Whether you're into UX, UI, technology, or just curious about the way design impacts our everyday lives, I think you should check out the show. Just search for Wireframe in your favorite podcast app, like the one you're using right now, or check out the link in the show notes. So thanks again to Wireframe for their support of this show. Well, this is so hard for me to admit that I feel like I'm in crisis mode right now, because I was comfortable with walking away from Sony. Sony's doing a great job. It's hard for me to move back and forth between systems. It's a lot of extra anxiety and, it slows you down. It costs you money. I'm going to just stick with Canon because they're doing a great job. I don't know now. I mean, the Sony makes a lot of sense. Before, I always thought of it in terms of, and this isn't bad advice still, but if in somebody like your situation, it would be great to have a cinema camera for a roll that just kind of is bigger and sits on a tripod. You can plug your mics into it. It's just kind of ready to go. You're not moving it around too much. And then a smaller camera that you're putting on gimbals and you're putting on sliders and you're packing up with you to vlog and you're doing everything else with. That's a really good system. I mean, it still is a really good system. And that's what I'd been thinking I'd do with the R6 or R5. But the problem is the Sony it looks like it can outperform some of the cinema cameras. It will probably look better than my C200. And that sucks. That really hurts, And
yeah,
let's break down why. I don't want to just throw that out
there. The dynamic range. Let's talk about that.
So it has S-Log3 and 10-bit, right? There is no 10-bit in the C200. It only either does 8-bit or RAW. The RAW is 12-bit. The A7S III can do 16-bit RAW on external recording, and it's ProRes RAW, which is a really great codec and plays very nicely with Apple computers, which, I had in Final Cut. And from the testing so far, and I think the best source on this so far was Gerald's video, he did like some very good tests of the dynamic range. He was saying an effective 13 stops, which is comparable to his tests of the C500 and the C300 Mark III.
Yeah. So I don't see a lot of reasons to spend as much money as Canon is asking for their C300 on a camera that potentially offers less usability for someone in my position. And in a lot of people's positions, if someone's trying to get into, creating, cinematic content, or, wants to learn more about dynamic range, or just interested in filmmaking, once you buy that C300, you're also going to have to upgrade a lot of your other gear just to use it. Tripods, fluid heads, batteries, media.
Yeah, I mean,
your computer.
well, you were saying how much you love V-mount batteries, but just by adding the battery. Okay, so you add the battery. That means you also need to add rails, and that amount of weight means everything has just gotten bigger. Like that stuff alone is heavier than just the camera. So your tripod, like you said, your tripod needs to be way bigger. Your slider, even sliders that are rated for these heavier cameras, I've had more issues with them when I'm putting the C200 on it. That like, if the camera is near the top weight rating for the slider, it's way more likely to be jittery. Whereas if it's far below, it's probably always fine. It's a huge difference. And so what you were just saying, I mean, I struggle to think like, okay, if I have the new Sony in front of me and I'm able to shoot with either it or the C200, like they're both right here and there's a choice, it'd be really frustrating to think like, I'm actually compromising a little bit on image quality by using my cine camera.
Yeah.
And that's possible.
But I think the biggest challenge, all other things considered, is I'm more likely to pick up a small camera to film something quickly than to turn on a large cinema camera. In fact, I might not even want to bring that with me anywhere because it's freaking huge.
Yeah.
You can't throw that in your little bag or something,
Well, and it used to make more sense when the cinema camera was like, you're going to justify it because it's always going to look better. And now if it's like, well, you're going to get the same or not quite as good of an image quality, like, oof, it's this. So this is why I'm saying at the beginning of this episode, like everything is really shifting now. And overnight, it's just with these few announcements. I mean, a little bit of that as well with the Canon R5 shooting 8K. It's still going to have some serious limitations, but the fact that it can do 8K and based on what Sony did, I'm convinced they will add C-Log 3, which has been rumored. I don't know why the rumor isn't C-Log 2. If you don't know, the numbers are different for Canon. So C-Log 2 has their most dynamic range, whereas with Sony, S-Log 3 has the most dynamic range. But even that, Canon's only rumoring to add their middle of the line dynamic range. So I don't know. I just drifted from making a point about why the R5 is good to a problem with it. But the point was supposed to be that a portable camera can still in some ways outperform any of the bigger cameras, which is just confusing. It's like, what are we supposed to be doing right now?
Buying lights.
Yes, that's true. Okay, we can't get to lights yet. It's still too soon.
That's fine.
What surprise? Oh yeah, okay, surprise. A big surprise. A lot of this again came from Gerald's video. He had the most news that was exclusive to that video, so I think it's a great watch. That this seems to be a dual ISO sensor, which I didn't read it in any of the marketing. Maybe it is there and I'm missing it, but it has dual native ISOs, meaning that the noise is basically completely clean at, he said, I believe 640 is the base ISO, which is lower than it used to be. It's great. It's a very good number. And then the higher one, I think you were saying 16,000.
Yeah, I heard 16,000. I watched it too.
Which is, that's high. That's way more important to me than having the 256,000 be, you can see in the dark. That see in the dark stuff I never found useful. Like I've shot on those cameras and it still looks like crap. You can see in the dark, but it's barely usable. You really have to run it through some noise reduction, and the colors are very muddy. It's not good see in the dark. You still need to buy lights, as Tommy would say. But having a higher base that is really clean so that, you can be lighting with just some home tungsten bulbs and like it looks real and it looks or candles. You can light by great example. You can light by candlelight and it will be just as clean as when you're using a big HMI or 600 LED or whatever. That's so useful. That is extremely powerful and changes filmmaking.
Yes, I agree with that. Being able to get clean images of natural life in low light environments. Previously it just wasn't possible without something like what Sony has just announced. Using neat video or whatever to clean up the noise is just not the same.
No, and it's horrible for your computer. Like, I have some noise reduction, but I try to never use it because all of a sudden your whole workflow just comes to it slows way down. It makes things a lot worse. So whenever you can avoid noise reduction, you should. It's one of the heaviest things to do in post. Whereas whatever your camera is doing as you record, the camera's built for that. It can handle it. Yes, another example of this was the Panasonics, the EV1. Am I getting that model number right? That had the dual ISOs. EVA, yes.
Okay.
And like Wally. And an important point about that second ISO is that it also maintains just as much dynamic range. So not only is it lower noise, or I don't know if it's just as much, but it kicks back up. So typically as your ISO raises, your dynamic range starts to shrink, but it's still excellent. I don't know if it's exactly as good, but still very good when you raise it up.
So moving to Sony, that means I'll also have to buy lenses.
Oh, yeah. That's why I'm so stressed out lately.
That was one of the main reasons I wanted to, I was excited about Canon because I have the Sigma 18-35 and EF mount.
What's your main lens right now?
That's it. Yeah. Sigma 18-35.
Yeah. It's what I'm shooting on right now. I use it a lot. I have a lot of complaints about it actually. Like it's a very widely used lens. It's really practical. I've found it to be softer than I hoped, and there's more chromatic aberration than I hoped, and it really lets you shoot in a lot of dynamic ways that is challenging with any other prime lens or zoom lens. But yeah, okay, buying Sony lenses. So the upside is both Sony and Canon have started to make their lenses very expensive. I don't know. That's only an upside because you're kind of screwed either way.
Right.
And they're both excellent. They're both very, very good. Like the modern glass is crazy sharp. You have tons of amazing options that, I thought we had good lenses before, but now we have a ton of great lenses. So, but yeah, the downside is they're all very expensive.
The thing that I find with lenses is they hold their resale value better. So,
That's true.
Moving between systems, you're supposed to marry the lens or whatever, but if you're going to just go to a completely new system, you might have a lot of equity in lenses you've never used, and you can offload those to move to another system.
Although you have a bit of an advantage because you're not too deeply committed to one or the other. You only have, it sounds like, a couple of lenses that you'd be getting rid of, whereas I've got a case.
Yeah.
And now, I would lose a lot of money. Like it would be, to the idea of, that's why I don't even really consider the idea of switching. Like a switch would be so expensive for me that I don't know. Cause I also don't really want to use a Sony for stills. Like I really like Canon for still photography, which is still an important part of my business. So.
Well, then adapters, they're getting so good these days.
We got to see how this is doing on the A7S III. You can't, as of the A7 III, you can't trust autofocus with the adapters. I saw a lot of videos being like, look, it got better. Every generation was like, it's better, it's better, it's better. And it was always just miles behind native. Like I just didn't use it except for, if you do like single shot stills. So, you can acquire focus, but it won't lock on. The servo mode isn't going to follow properly. It's not reliable. So you can and use, I did use them for sure. I did shoot with my Canon lenses on it quite a bit, but you're making some big trade-offs compared to if you use the native glass.
Yeah. There's things I like about pretty much all the cameras that I have, and I use them all for different reasons. The one thing that I like about the Nikon Z6 is SnapBridge, which is their mobile app, because it'll automatically pair with my phone when I turn the camera on. I don't have to open the app or anything. I just turn it on, take a picture, and then in like 10 seconds, a 2 megapixel render of that image is on my phone for social media.
I haven't used the way that Nikon does it. Everybody's still done it mediocrely in my experience. Like I haven't had the good experience that I'm still waiting for. New features on both the R5 and A7S III that, and I guess R6 that I haven't tested, but Tony Northrup was talking about is the ability to just offload over the new Wi-Fi standard that writes at something like 400 megabits per second over the network. So if you have Wi-Fi where you're shooting, you can be shooting directly to your computer at like no real speed cost, that's really good for studio shooting, not having to tether.
That's really cool.
I love that idea. Yeah. If it works, that's great.
Yeah. I guess I'm gonna probably have to sell some stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So again, this is why it's like, this is great news, but it comes with a lot of anxiety. And also, I mean, like, let's also be honest, it's pandemic year too. It's like things are weird. And so as somebody who, it's not like my photography hobby is just, something that like, I'm not a dentist just spending my free money on this. Like I need to see a return on the gear that I invest in. I need to make it worthwhile. And there's definitely less jobs this year. Like, not that like, I'm not complaining, like we're not in a bad place, but I have a hard time seeing the return at this moment. And I think I am not alone in that. I think there's a lot of people that are not going to be buying cameras this year that might have other years. And I don't think we're going to see that conversation much on YouTube because it's not fun, right? Like we all just want to be excited about this, but like, this is a time where a lot of us have to kind of like look at it and be like, do I need this right now? I
think that there's another side of that conversation. I think there's another side to that. I think that
convince me, talk me to
devil's advocate, right? So I think a lot more people are seeing the power of having your own social media property, being able to create content that you own, deliver your own message, and create a business out of video from home. I mean, I think you can learn something from everybody, but if you're never going to see that person, you're not going to learn from them. And I think a lot of people have their own message that they want to deliver to people. And so they're going to video because that's the one thing you can do at home. And so they're going to buy cameras. They want their videos to look good because they think if it's higher quality, it's going to get more views. And so they want the best camera still. I mean, there's still a market for it. Yeah, no, that is really true. I mean, this is the year especially for people that haven't considered video before to start investing in it and taking it more seriously. You're completely right about that. And I think if anybody's listening how would you have listened this far and you're not making videos? But if that happens to be you, go start making videos because it's just becoming part of our normal vocabulary now. So, that's even part of why, like, I try to keep this show pretty balanced between photography, filmmaking, videography, cinematography, and like tech, computers, phones. Yeah.
But I've let video take over a little bit more lately because I really do think it's an important part of how we all communicate. Like I don't think video is just about YouTubers anymore. I think it's for everyone in a lot of ways. And that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to ever think about a cinema camera, but knowing these techniques and being comfortable with making a great video is such a valuable skill these days.
It's a way to create that human, connection with people. You want to see someone's face when you're talking to them. Of course, this is a podcast, so that's
great example. There's so many businesses right now that we're seeing are having to make some kind of online transition in one way or another. And struggling with it. Even when I look at some of the restaurants that went to delivery or pickup only, and I went to a pizza place the other day that everybody's like, this is the best new place. It just opened. It's like, it's spectacular. You got to go. So I pulled up the website. All the website says is, here's our phone number. Call us to order. There's no dine-in right now, like pickup only. Like, what? Like, I can't see a menu. I can't order online. I can't, in this moment where I can't walk into your location, I can't go inside your establishment, you really got to try harder with the website. end of things. Like
No pictures of
this
food
is
or
when
anything?
it matters. No, there's not. It was just a single pager. Hopefully it's in development and maybe by now it's changed, but
Wow.
it's just like, I don't know. And I've run into a few other little examples of trying to order things and the service isn't great, or like all of this stuff, we all need to get amazing at it really quickly, and not the people. Like we know why it's important. Probably everybody listening does too. Like I don't have to sell you guys on this, but your friends and family, I'm sure some of them are running small businesses and like they've got to get some control themselves of this video stuff. And that doesn't just mean finding a filmmaker to hire to make a commercial for you. Like you got to get comfortable with this, because like if you're not able to run your own Instagram account and, post the photos of the latest menu items, or be able to set up a Stripe account for taking payments online instead of only over the phone, or whatever it is, there's a million things that, like, you got to figure this out right now, because this is where things are going.
That's business today. Maybe it's not business tomorrow, but when business tomorrow changes, you'll still have to adapt.
For sure.
Say if being successful was easy, everyone would do it. Well, you have to do the things that maybe aren't comfortable. You have to not be afraid to learn things sometimes. So I'm in complete agreement.
Just a side note, what do you program in? Like, what are you writing?
So I am a PHP developer. I also do a lot of front end stuff, HTML, CSS, JavaScript. I am mainly a systems architect. So I build databases primarily in MySQL, and just kind of create systems for applications, cool. APIs and things like that. I'm trying to make sure that I don't get too technical for anyone because I doubt that anyone's, there maybe is a couple people that write code listening.
No, it's good. I mean, so I took that's the stuff that I took in school, and I was always worse at the PHP MySQL end. So I ended up going more into so it was a little different the way you would do design back then. I mean, now it's shifted quite a bit so that if you're designing, you better be writing a lot more code. But at the time, we would design more in Photoshop. And if you only knew like Photoshop, CSS, and HTML, you could actually have a career. I realize these days it's a little different.
Yeah, I think AI does that part for you now.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I mean, whenever I need to work in something like even just Bootstrap right now, that compared to the old days is like, wow, it is so easy to build a website. Like the things that you would spend so long on in the past trying to micromanage every pixel and just make layouts flow over a page. And I mean, it goes through the whole stack too. People that like my backend team would say the same things about managing servers and stuff. It's like it's gotten a lot better. Same as cameras, technology has let us have a lot more interesting new opportunities. So
I completely agree. Yeah, technology's growing and getting better quickly. PHP.
I think there's a future in it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk about PHP for just one more second. So I read a lot of PHP, and PHP 7 came out a few years ago, and it's like a 99% speed improvement over the previous version of PHP, because they completely rewrote it from a template language to a scripting language to an actual programming language. They rewrote everything, and it's just incredible. I was with a company at the time. We were able to go from like 95 web servers to 2.
That's crazy. So, I mean, my understanding of PHP's reputation is that it's always a little bit like, it's aging and slow, and it had its place, but we've moved past it. Is PHP 7 like the moment where it's like, no, never mind, PHP's
it's
here
back
to stay because now it's great. Well, cool. I didn't realize that.
PHP 7 is the A7S3 of PHP.
So the fact that I vaguely, barely understand how to read it may not be as useless as I thought.
Yeah. I mean, that's interesting. That's my full-time thing. I do that 50 hours a week as a content creator person. The only real time I have is evenings and weekends. And that's also divided between my wife and my son and my 2 dogs. And it's just, where do you find the time?
Yeah, I admire you. That's great work ethic. And yeah,
Thank you.
It should be inspiring for anybody out there too. I mean, I think a lot of people feel like it's just not possible to do it because it is crazy time consuming for sure. So finding that extra space in the week is hard to do.
You always find the time for the things you're passionate about.
Well, speaking of passion, I think we can finally open the conversation up to lights for a minute.
Lighting.
You've especially got one of the most exciting lights, like period, right now. And you
what, this whole thing
recently.
For anyone watching, the Aputure Nova.
Yeah. So tell us why is the Nova so exciting?
Well, the Nova is a direct competitor aimed square at the Aries sky panel, which is, a $4,000+ light. And the Nova comes in at, $1,700. And the Nova is 70% brighter than the sky panel.
Let's make sure we clarify too, like sky panels are on every set, like not necessarily literally every, but most, like they are extremely widely used at a high level. They are ubiquitous in things that you shot. They're all over the place. People love sky panels. So having a realistic replacement for one at a more attainable price point is kind of crazy. Like it's one of those democratizing moments.
It's, it really is, because you think about, someone who's trying to start a rental house or, a business of some kind, because, businesses will come back and they need to buy 10 sky panels for the same price. They can get, 30 Novas. That's a significant difference.
Crazy.
And each one of those Novas will have 70% more output than the sky panels, just based on output, right?
Yeah.
And then on top of that, the Nova is RGB WW, so red, green, blue, white, and another white. And that the sky panel is only RGBW. So if you try and show, having only one white chip in the sky panel means that at one end of the Kelvin range, the CCT range, you're going to have really poor color quality because it's going to be using the RGB, the RG and the B chips to fill in to make tungsten instead of daylight, or vice versa. I don't remember which is which for the sky panel itself. But on the Nova, you're going to have very high color quality all the way through from 2000 to 10,000 Kelvin.
I found it really hard to understand, but the most helpful explanation I saw was when Aputure teamed up. Was this on the Indie Mogul channel actually? That Ted from Aputure teamed up with the guys from Quasar Science to talk about how do you say it? Are the W's first or at the end? Anyway,
so there's more than just that. So there's RGBW, there's RGBAW, which is the same as WW because it means white, or amber white, TW, tungsten white. It's just, or D, which is daylight. There's so many letters.
I'll try to remember to put the link to this video in the show notes though, because seeing the demonstration of what those differences are make you realize like, oh, that's why this matters. And it's also a good demonstration of the differences between gels and using a daylight light and using daylight light and adding gels and then using an RGB light.
Was that the live event?
No, there's a proper like edited video, and like the crazy examples is when you have like a bunch of fruit lined up in it, and it's not one of those like subtle differences. Like maybe some people notice, some people don't. If you have certain, especially reds and oranges, you can stop telling the difference between them, and to your eye, it's a world of, like it's clear. It's the difference between like an orange banana pepper and a red apple, and then you light it the wrong way, and all of a sudden, like they just disappear into each other and they become the same color.
It's an incredible difference. What a little chips in the technology that they're putting in these lights. But back to what we were saying with the differences between the sky panel and the Nova, and why the Nova is so exciting. One, it's brighter. 2, it has better and more color. 3, it has preset buttons, which are awesome, which was my favorite feature of the Light Panels Gemini, which is a time saver if you're trying to use lights to set up a few different shots. You can go ahead beforehand, set those presets in, just dial them in with this little button. I want to show you, but it's a podcast, so
well,
I'm
people
refraining.
watch your video. That link will be in the description for sure.
Yeah, I'm new to this format. But there's a whole slew of reasons, and just going off of the few that we've talked about already, it's just a better investment. There's the only reason you would still need to buy a sky panel is availability,
which hopefully will change, or even the feeling. Yeah, I mean the sort of, the trust of the system like that. And I've talked to Aputure about this too, that like an obstacle for them for a while has been, just getting on the trucks, like becoming part of the kit, because they need to trust your brand and know this ballast is not going to flake out on me. Like these cables that come built in with it are good enough and strong enough and, match up with everything else that we're using. Like everything needs to work together so that nobody on set is questioning that piece of kit, and it's not going to become the weak point that fails. And I can tell that Aputure is working really hard with everything they've done with other lights as well. I mean, the 300D Mark II was an amazing example of making that jump to like, look, this isn't just for YouTubers. Like this, we looked at what Hollywood needs, and like we want to be a part of it, and we want to justify our place on that lighting truck. And this is just the most incredible example of it. And it'd be really cool if we start seeing Aputure mentioned alongside, the Aries and the what are the other ones I'm thinking of? The light mats. I mean,
there's so many brands.
Yeah. But like, so that's the next place. If I could have one request for where Aputure goes next, it would be like taking on that light mat segment where there's tons of cheaper ones. I had a Soonwell for a little while that totally flaked out. So I just, I think it's in the garbage. Like I literally couldn't fix it. I opened it up and tried to resolder it. And I was like, this is actually broken. So there's tons of those like mats out there, but right now there only seems to be Light Mat as a brand that is like the really good one. Maybe you can tell me I'm wrong. Hopefully there's something more affordable that's amazing out there, but that's what the cinema world uses. And I love something that I can trust, which again, this is like what I was just talking about in motion. I'm saying like, okay, I know there's other cheaper brands out there, but I don't know if I can trust them. So I just want Aputure to do it because I know I can trust them. Yeah. This is the conversation that happens all over the place. Like you don't want to rediscover brands every month. Like you want to pick one and go with it for years.
And there's a couple brands I've used with light mats, not Light Mat, the brand, but there's Falcon Eyes and then there's IntelliTech. IntelliTech is, I think, probably a little bit more reliable than Falcon Eyes, simply because you can get a hold of someone in the United States.
That helps.
But yeah, there's lots of brands of light mat type, canvas style lights. I haven't had any issues.
And even to clarify, the other brand, like the Light Mat brand is Light Gear, is the brand name, and Light Mat is one of their products.
Yeah. But I do think that if Aputure came out with one and it worked with their little 2.4 gigahertz remote thing, that it would be awesome.
Yeah, you're in love with that remote where
It's the
I
best.
actually never take mine out of the bag. I forget that they exist, which like, I don't know why. I don't have a problem with them. I just don't. I didn't like incorporate them in my workflow. Maybe I should.
It's super. Well, I mean, so everything that I do, if I implement a piece of gear into my videos or my workflow, it's to save time because I've got so little of it to actually create stuff. So if turning all my studio stuff on is just like click, 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 then that's what I need to do.
What are the most important things for people to consider when they are buying lights? Like what should they be looking at? What do people buy that they may not actually need? Like how do people go wrong? Where should they start?
So many questions. So,
okay, let's say you don't own a light. What's the first light you should buy?
The first light that you should buy is a good key light. Something to light especially if you're doing like talking head videos, like most YouTubers would do, or someone who wants to deliver a message or film some type of interview or something like that. Something that can light your subject in a pleasing way. So probably something that you can diffuse, like a soft light. So I would say if you need one light and you've only got, $150, Godox sells that light because it's the cheapest one. It's one color temperature. It gets pretty bright, has really good color quality. Then you drop some type of diffusion on it. That's the first step.
I've always thought about just grabbing like a dozen of those because they're so cheap. Well, maybe not a dozen, but a few of those because they're relatively cheap and just have them around. Are there any downsides to those Godox? Because they are so cheap.
So the SL60, which is like the really popular one, or has been for a long time. I don't know if it's still the most popular one. The fan is kind of noisy, at least to my ears. So I actually ripped it out and soldered it and replaced it with, a really quiet fan from Noctua. Made a video on that. But then that introduced flicker at above 240 plus, frames per second, but only on certain units because the quality assurance is not great,
Right.
So there's the problem. It's a little bit noisy.
Okay, so let's say you've already got your first cheap light. What are the things to look for in like just quality? What really matters? There's a bunch of different ways of measuring it. Which people be looking for?
Build quality and feature set are really important, especially once you use the light for any period of time and you want to move it around a few times and, put it on a light stand, take it off. It needs to be a durable tool because if it falls apart, then you wasted your money. Just like anything you would want to buy. And then,
understand that.
And then there's features like, can it be battery powered? Because otherwise you're going to be attached to a power outlet all the time. And then obviously the light quality is super important, which is there's a few different metrics. There's CRI, which is the old metric, which everybody talks about, but nobody uses. And there's TLCI, which is the more modern metric that is better than CRI, but it's still already outdated. And then there's like TM30 and a couple others, but the big and the most important one to look at now is SSI, which is the Spectral Similarity Index, which is how close is this light to a known light source? And that's the one that Curtis Judd uses. So,
and what is a good rating for that? What should we hope that the light we buy is?
Above 80 is fantastic. 85 is like spectacular. And that's what the Nova has.
Well, I want one.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's in terms of the quality of light, which
Right.
is going to affect things like color reproduction. Again, like I said earlier, you can see these differences. They're not just make-believe.
Right.
What about output, especially in terms of like what numbers can we start using on a regular basis to really measure output? I feel like still today, a lot of us still talk in terms of what is it like compared to a 1K or a 2K or a 10K? Like we still look at these old tungsten lights and we're like, well, I know how bright that is in my mind. So let's just translate it to that.
Yeah.
Obviously some of these, there are metrics that can quantify this output, but they're mixed and there are a lot of them and they don't seem to be used in the same way by every brand. When can we find one number that we try to judge all of our lights against just to know how bright it is? This is such a basic thing.
Yeah.
What number should we be looking for?
So, there's not one number to look for. I use Lux.
Thanks.
Yeah. I use
Okay.
Lux because that's just what I've been measuring all these lights in this whole time. And that just seems like the thing that I should use. There's also like lumens and then there's foot candles. Those seem to be the big three that people kind of look at. There's probably more.
But so what would be a reason to which one is likely to win out? Like, I don't think we'll live in a world where like every time you discuss a light, you mention six or seven different properties about it that are all generally measuring, just
Output.
like output and color quality. When you say like SSI is likely to be the final measurement that we end up using for color indexing, which one do you have a favorite
Lux.
for output or?
I like Lux.
And what does it tell us? Like what does a specific Lux number say? Like, I think you were saying that was the Nova 9000. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah. So the Nova has a Lux output. Well, they market only a Lux output of, 9,000 Lux at 1 meter away. And that's how I have been measuring things. 1 meter away, you measure the Lux output. I like that one because it's a big number and you can get really fine with it. Foot candles is how much light is, one candle from a foot away is a foot candle, right? One little candle light, that's a foot candle. Now, I think that's hard because
I can understand that.
it's only one foot candle. How many lux is that? I don't even know. I haven't measured that. Right. But I don't know.
This is part of the challenge too, is it's like, okay, so this is how bright it is for 1 meter away. I don't know if the beam is focused in different spreads, then that's going to matter in different ways for the output of your room. So like,
correct.
Let's say I'm just trying to fill a space. So often like the ambient light in my room right now is being raised by just bouncing a 300D into the wall. And it's sort of like, it's kind of bouncing around, filling up the room a little bit. that output is so diffused that like if you only measure that in the center, you'll get one reading. But then if you take the new Nova 300, its output, it has either similar or maybe a little bit more output, but it's spread, right? So like it's not as focused. So will that fill the room in the same way?
I get what you're saying. So what I've been calling that is the quantity of output, which is, I don't know really what the measurement is to determine that other than like reading a spectral graph of some kind or measuring it a whole bunch of different ways and then graphing it. But the way I liken it is you could measure the lux output of a laser pointer and it would probably be, in the millions, right? But you try and diffuse that laser pointer and you're not going to be able to light yourself.
Yep. No, but that's such a good example and part of why it's hard for us to understand as lead people.
Right. And so that's something that a soft panel like the Sky panel is, well known for. Is it's a soft diffused light with a very wide beam angle that has a very significant output. And the Nova, is almost double that. And it's already soft. There's no spotlight. There's no Fresnel. There's no focusing. It's just diffused wash, complete ambient, a 120 degree beam coming from something like Nova.
Okay, here's me. I'm going to be stupid for a minute. And here, I've never understood correctly about Fresnels that they are effectively, it's like, in a way, it's sticking a magnifying glass on the front of your lens a little bit, right? On the front of your light. It's a lens to focus the light, and the output increases as you do that when you measure it. Like, Aputure will tell us a rating, and I got to ask them about this. I'm hoping to get them on the show, so maybe they can give me the clear, easy to understand answers. Your output is increased by putting a Fresnel on the end of your light. But is it actually increased or is it just focused? Like, is there more total output? Again, if I go to the example of like, if I just bounce it into a wall and then I bounce a default reflector side by side, are they going to have a total different output in the room, or they should? I would think they'd be the same.
Yeah. So the output of the light doesn't change, right? Once that chip is turned on, it's on. That's it. It's not.
Yes.
It's not going to get brighter. It's not going to get less bright. You're correct in that it's essentially a type of magnifying glass. It directs the light in one direction. It makes all the photons, instead of going around the room, they're going forward. So yeah, that's essentially what a Fresnel is doing, is pushing the light forward. But a good Fresnel it's supposed to have a soft fall off. So it's like kind of bright in the center and then like it kind of fades off really pretty into the sides. There's another style of modifier called a spotlight, or an ellipsoidal spotlight lens thing, which is, it's like the Lecos and the Source 4s, or I guess is what they call them. I have the Aputure Spotlight, and that's a Bowens mount tool, and you can stick it on a light that is a Bowens mount, light, and that has much more of a magnifying glass and is focusable. And so that is a much more directional light that you can carve out shapes on. That's what you would use to, they have these things called gobos, which is like a little lasered out design. You could put your company's logo on it or something. You stick that in front of it, and then you'll focus it to the back of your wall. And that is the purpose of a spotlight. And that's going to be a lot brighter, I think, than a Fresnel, because it's much more focused. Yeah. That's, I guess, I hope that answers your question.
Cool. Yeah, no, I think it does. I think there's a wider gap. Fresnel is one of the tools that there's like a wider gap between people like knowing how to use it and thinking they might want one, because, it's like, how do I make this useful compared to a softbox? Softbox, it's like, oh, sure. Yeah. Just stick it on and now my light looks the way that I wanted it to, because that's how YouTubers are doing it. Whereas a Fresnel, like, so examples that I have been making, I don't have any lenses for any of my lights, but the reasons I would want them and that I've thought about it is like, there's things you can do where, for example, if you want to cross your light over greater distance by focusing it more, now you're not spreading it out into the room. And if you don't have enough space to, let's say, like bounce it into some kind of a reflector, you could have you could have the light slightly across the room, focused onto whatever white reflective source you have, and then it's bouncing back. without needing to put it right up against it, which can be very challenging depending on the amount of space that you have available.
Yep.
So that's just like one example of where being able to focus the light is helpful.
Yes, that's a great use case for the spotlight, because it's super directional, and you can carve out a little square, like to go through a doorway, and then just stick some diffusion, and then your key light's right there, but all it is the diffusion.
A great example that my friend Barry's been putting to amazing use is mirrors. So he will have a key soft light, and then a series of, they're not actually mirrors, they are a product, and I'm forgetting the name of it right now, but they're just like metal reflective surfaces of various grades of softness. And he'll mount a few of them around the room to basically create those little spots of sunshine splash that you would get with real sun. And it makes artificial sunlight look so much more realistic than when you just have a big soft source. Like, it's night and day when you see the before and after of just put up a big soft and you think it looks like a window light, but once you see either little slashes of light or little pools of light, like that's what sunlight looks like, because it's bouncing off of a lot of different things before it gets into the room. I don't know. It's just like, it's a really interesting technique that I haven't started applying yet, but I'm going to investigate.
One thing I've used the spotlight for was I was doing a little short film for one of the Aputure contests with some friends, and we used the Aputure spotlight as a key light, but using the ceiling as the key light. So we had the Aputure spotlight, kind of down out of frame or whatever, because we needed the whole scene to not have equipment in it. And there was a little spot behind a little teeny cove in a wall up on the ceiling, and I just bounced it off that. And that was our key light, was just the reflection of the light off of the ceiling. It worked really well.
I do that kind of thing all the time. It's super helpful. Oh man, I could talk about lights forever, but I guess we don't have forever. So people are going to have to go to your channel to check it out, because you're the light guy, and I appreciate your very in-depth analysis of all the lights that I desperately want to buy. So
thanks
for coming on, Tommy.
Hey, thanks for having me.